What is up? What is up, YouTube? I finally got I cleaned up the studio, y'all. I had too many leaves coming in the house. So I got this is Studio B right here, right? The second setup, I guess. So yeah, I got the setup. But I'm trying to think, is it too dark? Y'all let me know. Is this too dark? Or should it be like that? It's kind of bright on my face, but I'm trying to light up the rim a little bit. Learning color grading, y'all. We color grading. Oh my gracious, check it out, man. So I think that might be too bright, but if we go with this, I forgot which way I turned it. Yeah, right there. One of those gonna work. So we going with this for right now, but let me know if the brighter is better. But y'all might want it dark, so you know, like you're in a movie theater. Feel me? Check this out, man. I was watching this. Before we do this, every horrifying allegations against P. Diddy. Every horrifying allegation against my man P. Diddy, or your man. Check this out, man. I want y'all to see this right here. Watch this. My man flying on a leaf. No. Man. Anyway, I like silly stuff like that, man. But check it out, man. Check it out. Hey, y'all hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell. Let's check this bad boy out, man. Every horrifying allegation against your boy P. Diddy. Let's check this bad boy out. Here we go.
The bombshell allegations against P. Diddy just keep on coming. Honestly, there's so many, it's hard to keep up. And that's why we're breaking them all down for you right now. Every allegation against P. Diddy and what's ahead. I'm Sarah Gillespie, this is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime.
Every last one of them, y'all.
So if you thought that P. Diddy would just go away quietly after his arrest back in September, he's booked in MDC jail in Brooklyn, we're not going to hear from the guy. You are completely wrong, because this man has not stopped making headlines since then. Even into the new year, we've got way more lawsuits filed against him. The allegations just don't show any sign of slowing. So let's get right into it and go through them. Now, to be clear, we're going to be talking about a lot of cases filed against Diddy, both criminal and civil. The criminal trial is set to move forward in May of 2025 for charges including sex trafficking and racketeering, and Combs has pled not guilty to all of these charges. There's also dozens and dozens of civil lawsuits pending against Diddy, alleging everything from sexual assault to rape. A majority of those cases are still pending, and there have been no court rulings on them yet. But before we get into all of those allegations, we've got to start with the man himself, 55-year-old Sean Combs. He goes by a bunch of different names. P. Diddy, even Puff Daddy.
What kind of man, grown man, calls himself Puffy?
Whatever you want to call him, he's pretty famous. You probably know him from his rapper days. He came up in like the early 2000s, 90s. That's actually when he straight up told us he's a bad boy for life and gave us a major warning about all of this. So you might know his music, or if not, you might have read about him in magazines, as I did as a kid. I remember reading about those famous white parties that were in the Hamptons and then later in California. This guy was like a known partier and actually like really reviled. People loved him. But things changed a bit when we heard some pretty stark allegations, and those come in November of 2023. That's when Cassandra Ventura files a civil suit against P. Diddy and honestly breaks open the floodgates. Cassandra Ventura is probably more well known as Cassie. She was Diddy's girlfriend for a really long time and actually met him through the music industry. So they started working together, let's say, when she was only 17. I believe she was still a child. He was much older than her. It started as kind of a mentor relationship, but according to her civil lawsuit, he was pretty severe right away, really domineering over both her career and her personal life. And she was with him for multiple years. From the outside, this looked like the coolest relationship ever. I mean, their photos on the red carpet were so beautiful. Cassie looked so cool. Everything just looked absolutely awesome. But behind closed doors, things were a little different, at least according to Cassie. We found out about all of these allegations through Cassie's lawsuit, and I'll just go through a couple of them because there are a lot. So she says Diddy sexually assaulted her, raped her, forced her to carry illegal firearms. He also forced her to do drugs, forced her to have sex with prostitutes, and recorded all of this and then basically used it as revenge porn. Cassie is also the first person to introduce us to that phrase freak-offs. That's kind of become synonymous with the P. Diddy case. She's the one who explained it, and here's what she said. Basically, Diddy, or one of his associates, would drug the person, the victim in this case. It could be Cassie. It could be one of the many other people in the lawsuits we'll discuss as this episode goes on. Whoever his target was for the day, this person would likely be drugged, then forced to have sex with a prostitute as Diddy watched on, oftentimes masturbating. I forgot to add, sometimes he would drug these people too against their will. Long story short, he recorded all of this, and then he used this as revenge porn. As I said, he basically said, I will release this information if you make any of this public. So a lot of people were scared into secrecy. That is until Cassie came forward with her lawsuit. And here's where Diddy's team made a key mistake. They didn't settle with Cassie outside of court. So she files the lawsuit and then it's settled one day later. So we're thinking no harm, no foul. But that's not entirely true because it was made public. It was filed in court. I've read the lawsuit. You can go and look up the lawsuit right now and read it for yourself. It was made public. And that is the key mistake. I've talked to so many experts who say Diddy's team 100% knew that a lawsuit was coming. They had to have conversations with Cassie's team before all of this. So they had the heads up. They could have filed outside of court, and thus this wouldn't have been made public, but they chose not to, so it was made public. And this led to a lot of other lawsuits being filed in the coming months, years even. A lot of people actually referenced Cassie in their lawsuits too. They straight up...
Man, I'm just going to be honest with y'all. That was mistake number 2, I think. I think the Lil Rod Jones filed first and then Cassie, I think. Don't quote me on that. But one of them was mistake number 1 and the other one was mistake number 2. Because when they started filing, that's what made it public. And once you went public, that's when all this stuff started coming out. Facts.
Said that it was Cassie's courage coming forward with these allegations that led them to do the same thing. So Cassie filed her suit under something called the New York Survivors Act. And basically what this allowed is that any survivor of sexual assault could come forward and pursue civil charges against their alleged predator, regardless of statute of limitations. Now, there was a deadline for this, and it was back in, I believe, November 2023, maybe late December. So that's when Cassie filed. And a couple of other women also came forward and filed under the New York Survivors Act. Let's start with Joy Dickerson-Neal. She says Diddy sexually assaulted her all the way back in the 90s. She was a student at Syracuse University. And her name is pretty big in all of this because she's one of the first people who filed after Cassie. Then there's Liza Gardner, who also says she was raped by Diddy in New York in the 90s. She also says that Diddy choked her past the point of consciousness. Really, severe stuff she's laying out. That brings us to the third case that was filed after Cassie. That's Jane Doe number 1. And as we go on with all of this, you'll realize there are quite a few Jane Does. I honestly don't even know the number. There are too many to count. But this girl is the OG Jane Doe. She says that Diddy raped her also in New York. The difference here is that she was only 17. Yeah, she was a minor when all of this happened. She says that she met one of Diddy's associates, Harvey Pierre, in Detroit. He then flew her from Detroit all the way to New York, and she met up with Diddy at his recording studio, and that's where the rape happened. The difference with this Jane Doe is that she included photos in her lawsuit. So you can actually see her there at the studio. You can also see her with Diddy. Her face has been blurred, obviously, because her name is Jane Doe to us. We don't know her real name, but she proves that she was there. Another person who included photos in his lawsuit was Lil Rod. And this is a really big one because if you could ignore P. Diddy in late 2023, you're like, okay, yeah, this celebrity is involved in a couple of these lawsuits, blah, blah, blah. Come February of 2024, you really can't ignore it anymore because it's just getting bigger and bigger. Now, Lil Rod is Rodney Jones. He was a producer on Diddy's Love album, and he filed this pretty wild lawsuit. He's filed a couple of them. There have been like initial filings and amended complaints. I don't remember which is which at this point because, again, there's literally hundreds of pages of court docs, but at least one is about like 80 pages. One could be 100. And he goes through just like laying out allegation after allegation. And he corroborates a lot of what Cassie said. And some of the other women too, he talks about freak-offs. He alleges that Diddy sexually assaulted him, forced him to do drugs, forced him to have sex with prostitutes. He also says that Diddy facilitated other celebrities sexually assaulting Lil Rod himself. On top of all of that, Lil Rod says that Diddy is the ringleader, so to speak, in a gun trafficking and drug trafficking scheme. And drugs are something we see through a lot of these civil suits as well. A lot of people claim that they were drugged. They also claim that they went to parties where there were a lot of illegal substances being used. So that's kind of a pattern throughout all of this. As for the firearms, Cassie does allege that she had to carry illegal firearms because Diddy wanted her to. And in Lil Rod's lawsuit, we hear about this too. Back in 1999, there was this nightclub shooting. I'm not going to go wildly into it because there was a lot that happened. Long story short, Diddy got acquitted. But initially, he was arrested with the rapper Shyne, who was convicted eventually. But then there was J-Lo too, because J-Lo and P. Diddy were dating at the time. Remember when J-Lo wore that like awesome green dress to the Grammys, I believe it was, and broke the internet and created Google image photos? That one, she was dating Diddy at the same time. So when this nightclub shooting happens back in 1999, Lil Rod says that Diddy forced J-Lo to carry illegal weapons. So Lil Rod's lawsuit comes out in February. And then in March, things really ramp up, and that is when the feds raid two of Diddy's homes, one in Florida and one in California. And at the time, everyone's wondering, what's going on? Is he going to face charges? And there was quite an interim between the time that these federal search warrants were executed and eventually he was charged. And I remember interviewing multiple experts about all of this, including Julie Rendelman. We're going to have her on later on in this particular interview. So about a year ago, last March, I said to Julie, what is going on? They filed these search warrants. They collected items from Diddy's home. Why aren't we having any charges? Why haven't we seen an indictment? And she said, it's not if he will be charged, it's when. And Julie was right. It was when. It was a 6-month space between all of that. The feds were going through all of their information. And something I've learned too about federal prosecutors is they don't play. They don't mess around. They're not going to bring any sort of charges unless they can 100% prove them. At least they believe they can. And now it seems like they believe they can. A federal indictment came down for P. Diddy back in September of 2024. So when that federal indictment comes down, we finally see the charges that Diddy now faces. And these are just the logistic things I have to say. These are the things that P. Diddy is charged with: racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. A lot of big words, but pretty similar allegations to the things that we heard echoed in Cassie's lawsuit, Lil Rod's, and the many to come. I want to talk about another lawsuit too that was filed by another Jane Doe. This lawsuit has since been dropped, but I think it's really important to highlight because it made such waves in that she named P. Diddy, of course, but then later she also named Jay-Z and alleged that he raped her. So according to this Jane Doe, she was raped when she was just a child, 13 years old, and this was in the early 2000s at a VMAs after party in New York. She says she had a drink, it tasted kind of funny. She then went to lay down, and Diddy came in with Celebrity A. At first, that's all he was known as, Celebrity A, and Celebrity B. And these two watched as Diddy raped her, and additionally, Diddy watched as Celebrity A raped her. At first, it was just Celebrity A and Celebrity B, but eventually she amended all of this and changed it. Celebrity A became known as Sean Carter, Jay-Z, so she straight up says, Jay-Z raped me, and so did P. Diddy. We still don't know for sure who Celebrity B is. This is not confirmed in any way. This lawsuit has since been dropped. Jay-Z has filed suit against Tony Busby, who's the attorney who brought it. He also filed suit against Jane Doe recently for defamation. Again, as I said, she dropped the suit, but it's still important in the storyline of this case.
Okay.
As is Tony Busby. This guy came forward in, I want to say, October of last year after these federal charges have been brought against P. Diddy. And he says there are hundreds of people who have come to him and say, we have been sexually assaulted by P. Diddy. We've been verbally assaulted, physically assaulted, drugged, whatever it may be. And he said that there are hundreds of people and hundreds of civil suits that he planned to file. So around that time.
But it was thousands of people that came forward. They had a different hotline also that had 3,000 people on that hotline. And Busby said that he narrowed it down to 120 to be exact. That's what he said.
Time last fall, I had him on Law and Crime, talked to him in the interview, and he told me there are actually 1,000 people who have been affected by P. Diddy. He came forward and did this press conference announcing those hundreds of lawsuits. And then he comes forward and says, now, no, there are 1,000 people plus potentially have been affected by P. Diddy. There haven't been thousands or even hundreds of lawsuits filed just yet, but there have been a lot. We've already gone through a few of those allegations, but we're not even close to being done. Let's move on to Grace O'Marcaigh. She filed civil suit against P. Diddy and his son, and she claimed that Diddy facilitated sexual assault. He's the one who rented the yacht. She was working on the yacht at the time. He basically paid her bill, hired her to work there. Then she was allegedly sexually assaulted by Diddy's son, so she filed civil suit. Then we're on to Crystal McKinney. She was 22 years old at the time of this alleged assault and a model. She says that Diddy forced her to perform oral sex and then later blacklisted her and basically ruined her career as a model. There's also a suit filed by April Lampros, who was at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York back in 1994. So again, another one of these allegations that dates way back to the 90s. Diddy allegedly pressured her to drink and then took her to a hotel room and raped her there. There are other men who have filed suit against Diddy too.
Crazy.
For instance, Derek Lee Cardello-Smith. He claims that Diddy offered him $2.3 million to allow everything just to go away. That didn't go away, and that's how we know his name. He's filed suit against Diddy. This guy is a bit interesting. He's behind bars as of right now, and he actually appeared in court from jail. Anyway, he says that Diddy sexually assaulted him and he deserves something in return, some sort of monetary compensation. Then there's Don Richards.
Hold on. Let's get back to my man. This guy right here, they just filed documents stating that the police officer that arrested and all the lawyers and stuff, they have wrongly accused them on purpose. They took bribes. They said they took bribes and all that stuff. So you might want to keep an eye on this guy right here. He been filing on his own behalf the whole time he been in jail, trying to prove his innocence. And I think he's finally going to break through because the female officer is coming clean with her Diddy story, basically. Yeah. So keep an eye on him. Actually
appeared in court from jail.
Yeah.
Anyway, he says that Diddy sexually assaulted him and he deserves something in return, some sort of monetary compensation. Then there's Don Richard, who you may know as a member of Danity Kane or Diddy Dirty Money, a musical person who worked along Diddy. And she says she actually saw him assaulting Cassie. So when she went up to Cassie and tried to help her, Diddy then threatened her life. So she's since filed suit. There's a different suit filed by Talia Graves, who alleges that Diddy raped her back in 2001. He tied her up naked with her hands behind her back as a bodyguard forced her to perform oral sex also. Again, these are just allegations, but still pretty severe. On to another Jane Doe. This allegation brings us to 2020 when she says that Diddy forced her to ingest ketamine and also forced her to have sex. Later, she found bruises and bite marks on her body. Eventually, she says she became pregnant and Young Miami, who had been dating P. Diddy, harassed her into having an abortion and she eventually miscarried. Again, these are just allegations, but still pretty severe. On to another Jane Doe. This allegation brings us to 2020 when she says that Diddy forced her to ingest ketamine and also forced her to have sex. Later, she found bruises and bite marks on her body. Eventually, she says she became pregnant and Young Miami, who had been dating P. Diddy, harassed her into having an abortion and she eventually miscarried. On to another lawsuit now. This one has been dismissed, but I still wanted to include it in our story because it's another allegation and goes along with the Diddy timeline. Now, this lawsuit had been brought by John Doe out of Georgia. He says this allegation happened back in 2021 when he was invited to a party. And this is a similar pattern we've seen over and over. He says he was drugged, became paralyzed, and after that, Diddy allegedly raped him. Another John Doe also says something similar happened back in May of 2008 at Macy's. This is when Diddy was working on the Sean John brand and promoting it. John Doe says that someone hit him with a pistol. He fell to his knees and then Diddy forced him to perform oral sex. Another John Doe says something similar happened in New Jersey in 2006. He was working as security detail at an event that Diddy had. He had a drink. It tasted kind of funny. Diddy then forced him into a truck and allegedly sodomized him. Jane Doe, back in 1995, says she was at a party for a Biggie Smalls video when Diddy pulled her aside and kissed her. Additionally, she says he hit her and raped her and then told her that she would disappear if she told anyone about this. A different incident in 1998 comes from a John Doe lawsuit. He was 16 years old at the time, and at one of those infamous white parties, Diddy told him that he needed to inspect John Doe's penis as a rite of passage. Another Jane Doe says that she met Diddy at a photo shoot back in 2004 and he later raped her at a hotel room. Another John Doe says he met Diddy back in 2022. He said that Diddy exposed his genitals and then he grabbed John Doe's genitals. And none of this stopped until a professional athlete walked into the room and then everything kind of stopped from there. A different John Doe was a personal trainer. He says he was drugged and assaulted by Diddy and a different celebrity who was not name dropped. Apparently this happened in 2022 after a party for an awards show. There were well-known people who were apparently having group sex. He was drugged and says that Diddy performed non-consensual oral sex on him and also made him perform oral sex on this unnamed celebrity. A different Jane Doe says something happened back in 2014 when she had some Ciroc at a party in Las Vegas. She woke up the next morning completely sore. She didn't have a shirt on, and she woke up to Diddy yelling at someone on the phone, and that's when she realized she'd been raped. A different Jane Doe says in 2022, she was at a party in New York where a lot of people were talking about the music industry. Her drink was drugged allegedly, and then Diddy raped her and sexually assaulted her. And this one is really scary. She says that there were later imprints on her arms and her wrist, like she'd been tied up with ropes, almost restrained. She also says she found blood on her legs and bruising on her lips. This one is really tough to talk about John Doe. He was only 10 years old in 2005 when this allegedly happened. He really wanted to be a rapper, so he met up with Diddy at a hotel room and performed a couple of raps for him. He says he drank a soda that made him feel kind of funny, and he woke up with his pants undone. His anus and his buttocks hurt really badly, and then Diddy threatened him if he told anyone. Another John Doe was underage when all of this happened. He was 17 back in 2008 when he was assaulted during a Making the Band audition in New York. He says he was sexually assaulted multiple days in a row. Apparently, he was groped by Diddy. He was forced to perform oral sex, and Diddy masturbated during all of this. DeWitt Gilmore says in 1996, Diddy blocked his car. So this guy was driving away. Diddy zoomed in front of him and blocked him, wouldn't let him leave. And then Diddy brought out some guns and actually fired several shots. This lawsuit is a little different, doesn't include sexual assault, but it does include assault and battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Another John Doe takes us to 2022 in New York City when he was allegedly drugged at a party and awoke to find Diddy sodomizing him. Another John Doe in New York says in 2001, he was playing a cop in a music video. He had a drink of some Diet Coke that tasted really weird, and he woke up to find Diddy sexually assaulting him. On to yet another Jane Doe. She says she was 17 years old when she saw Diddy at a 4th of July party in New York. The similar pattern happened here. Jane Doe alleges that she had a drink and started to feel disoriented. Eventually, she says she lost consciousness and woke up to her genital area throbbing. Yet another Jane Doe says that she was sexually assaulted when she was only 18 years old. She was at a party in New York. It was a Halloween party at a nightclub. And as she left, she was forced into a limo that was Diddy's. She had a drink and it tasted kind of weird. And then she was forced to perform sexual acts. A different allegation comes from John Doe in Miami in 2022. He says that there were a lot of celebrities at the party he was at, and eventually he lost consciousness. He later had a sharp pain in his anus and found Combs trying to anally rape him. Another major lawsuit comes from Brianna Bana Bongolan back in 2016. She met Diddy through Cassie because she was friends with Cassie and alleges that Diddy sexually battered her. This allegation also made headlines because Diddy allegedly dangled her from a 17-story balcony.
Wow,
back to another Jane Doe
crazy.
allegation. This one takes us to 1991 in New York City. She met Diddy at a charity basketball game. She met up with him in the locker room and had a soda that tasted kind of funny. After that, Diddy allegedly sexually assaulted her and raped her, and then he threatened her. He said people can come up missing. Yet another lawsuit filed by 𝗗𝗢𝗡𝗞𝗦. He was actually Diddy's executive assistant for 2 years. And his lawsuit is kind of crazy because he says he is one of the people who had to facilitate these sex parties or the freak-offs. He had to clean up after them too. He basically says in this lawsuit, he had to provide illegal drugs, a lot of lube. This is something we saw in Diddy's federal indictment, the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. According to 𝗗𝗢𝗡𝗞𝗦, he had to provide all of this for the party. And then afterward, he had to go and clean it up and make sure there was nothing in the hotel room, no blood or feces or urine in any of the sheets. He said this was kind of a common occurrence. So he's also filed suit against Diddy. Another Jane Doe says she was 16 years old and living in Lower Manhattan when she was assaulted by Diddy. At the time, she was a babysitter for someone who was dating Diddy. So in 2000, he gave her a ride home and asked her to have a drink just to calm her down. But after that, he allegedly sexually assaulted her. John Doe says in 2015, he was drugged with 𝗟𝗏. That's something we've seen throughout all of this, not just being drugged, but being drugged specifically with a 𝗟𝗏, which is one of Diddy's vodka brands. This John Doe says he woke up with his pants off. Diddy was on top of him. He tried to get away, but says security stepped in and allegedly forced him to have sex with women he didn't know or want to have sex with, all as Diddy allegedly watched. Another Jane Doe says she met Diddy at a...
This dude liked to watch, though. I know one thing. He liked to watch and play with himself in the corner somewhere. That's his MO, right?
New York City private party in the 1990s. She also says Diddy drugged her and prevented her from leaving and then forced her to have sex with other people as he watched. Another Jane Doe says an assault happened in 1997. She was working in the Hamptons as bottle service, and Diddy encouraged her to have a drink. She says she believes it was laced. She was then sexually assaulted and raped, allegedly, by Diddy and his associates, and she says that Diddy directed other people to rape her. Then there's another suit from a different John Doe. This is in 2012 when he was only 17 years old. This boy had traveled from Indiana to New York to visit his brother, and he went to this club in Soho. He was given a shot and then invited to a back room, and when Diddy approached, he was given another shot. He says he felt really off and later was allegedly anally raped. Another John Doe says his assault happened in 2022 when Diddy drugged and forcefully raped him. He'd been performing at a popular club and a scout approached him saying Diddy's looking for talent. He eventually had a drink though, he felt dizzy and then was forced to give oral sex and was raped anally. A different John Doe was only 18 when he says this assault happened back in 2009 in Beverly Hills. It was at an industry party where he says that he was drugged and eventually escorted to a hotel room where he says Diddy anally raped him and then later asked if he enjoyed it. Moving on to John Doe out of Manhattan, he says he was 21 years old and auditioning for a music video when he got brought into another room and asked to get naked, but he refused, so Diddy grabbed his butt and got really angry and upset. Jane Doe in 2016 says she was only 20 years old and Diddy approached her at a club with a drink. She says she didn't want it, but Diddy didn't take no for an answer. He said he told her to drink it. He wasn't asking her. So she felt nervous and drank it. She then says that Diddy shoved his hands up her skirt and fingered her. Another Jane Doe says she was assaulted
Wow.
in 1999. She was 23 years old and a model at the time. She says she was drugged and even held hostage by P. Diddy at his home. She attempted to leave for hours, and he also, during this period, attempted to force her to have sex. In 2002, a different Jane Doe says she was walking home when she was approached by a car in New York City. So she hopped in and went to one of P. Diddy's parties. She started to feel weird, though, after she had a drink, and then some of her clothes were being taken off. She says she was able to escape, but she alleges they took a picture of her photo ID, and Diddy's security then said, "We know where you live." So basically, they threatened her. Then there's Latasha Forbes. Her lawsuit has multiple people, actually 7 in total. And the allegations in this specific suit range from 1995 to 2014. And the allegations include being drugged, raped, and sexually assaulted, again, all at the hands of Diddy. John Doe in New York City says he was sexually assaulted in 1997. He says he was drugged in a recording studio, and then Diddy paid him straight cash just to keep him quiet. Yet another John Doe says he was assaulted in the late 1990s. He was working in the fashion industry, and this is the time when Diddy was working on Sean John. It was at a 1998 white party, and he says that Diddy tapped his butt and twisted his nipples. He says he didn't like this, but couldn't confront Diddy because of the business relationship and the potential implications there. We're hearing a lot about white parties in all of these, and yet another situation happened allegedly in 2007. Jane Doe was only 18 years old, and she says she started to feel loopy after having a drink. When her friend found her, she was naked with a bunch of men surrounding her, and the men reminded her, "What happens at this party stays here." Also in New York in 2001, Jane Doe says a bodyguard used his connection to Diddy to lure her to his apartment and then sexually assaulted her at gunpoint. Back to those white parties, John Doe says he was 19 years old and he was DJing at a white party. Eventually, he was encouraged to drink, so he had one at least, and he passed out in the DJ booth, and he woke up to find men assaulting him. Staying in New York, Jane Doe says in 1998, she was in the bathroom of a restaurant, and Diddy pinned her against her will until a professional athlete intervened and came in. That's actually the second time we've heard in one of these lawsuits that a professional athlete who's not named intervened. Just something to note. Another Jane Doe says she was assaulted by Diddy in New York City. She was first drugged at a bar, and then she says Diddy followed her to the bathroom and assaulted her. She was in the stall, and she says that Diddy burst in. He was showing off his genitals, and thankfully someone else walked in and she was able to get out. Another suit comes from Kirk Burroughs of Bad Boy Entertainment. He was actually the co-founder. He alleges that Diddy forced him to witness a lot of these sexual acts, you know, the alleged rape, sexual assault, drugging of people. And he says that Diddy did this to psychologically break him down. He also alleges that in 1996, Diddy forced him to sign over 25% stake in Bad Boy. As promised, those are all the allegations against P. Diddy at the time of this recording. But there's even more to discuss, so let's jump to our interview. So we completed all of our homework. We went through all of the allegations, and now we get to the really fun part, which is the interview. And today we're bringing on criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman, a long crime legal analyst, my friend, the person who I will text if I have any legal questions, or who I would call if I got arrested too. Julie, that would be you. But we're talking about P. Diddy today. I don't plan to get arrested. I wanted to start, though. So many allegations against him.
Wow.
What do you think? Do you think he did them?
Which one?
So many allegations against him. You think he did it? God damn, that was like, that hit hard right
I wanted
there.
to start, though. So
That's
many allegations
crazy.
against him. What do you think? Do you think he did them?
Which ones here? Which ones
All
are we
of
talking
them.
about? There's like too many to count.
You're right. There are like almost 100. I guess generally, like, he's been accused of sexual assault over and over again. Do you think that he did it?
So I think like I want to separate kind of the federal cases, the federal case from some of the civil cases. I don't want to be questioning individuals in terms of their civil suits, because obviously people come forward with valid claims. But there does sometimes feel like there's like a pile on when it comes to these like celebrities that get arrested. For example, in this case with this federal crime, and all of a sudden you start to see like 1 billion civil suits. There are certain claims that I question only because I really haven't heard any corroboration at all. And so, that's when I start to question kind of the potential credibility of just some of the witnesses and some of the suits.
I mean, there's so many, and some of them are kind of corroborated. Like, for instance, Cassie kind of says some things that Lil Rod says, and like some of them do overlap, but I see what you're saying. Some of them are kind of outliers in all of this. But the allegations are crazy, and I wanted to go back to Cassie because this still blows my mind to this day. The fact that she filed this suit and it was settled the next day. Why wouldn't he just settle it before it was ever filed? Because that really was the chain reaction that like started everything going. He could have prevented all of this. Like, we wouldn't be here talking right now. So why didn't he just do that?
I think a lot of times what happens is, you're threatened with this lawsuit for a period of time. Maybe you've been negotiating, maybe you haven't. Maybe you don't think they're really going to do what they say they're going to do. And so you kind of do that kind of chicken where you're like, okay, go for it. And then you can't believe that they went for it. And then you realize you have to shut it down right away. And so again, I don't know what happened with him. But that may very well be what happened, because it's pretty amazing to file a lawsuit and literally have it done within hours.
Like a day later. And I think you could be right in part of it, because if we're believing Cassie's lawsuit, it sounds like Diddy was super domineering over her and controlled every aspect of her life and threatened her with all of this. So he potentially could have been like, yeah, okay, let's see. Will you do it? And then she did. And it was kind of a chain reaction, one after another after another. Right. And some of the lawsuits actually bring up underage people who've allegedly been sexually assaulted by Diddy. But this isn't something he's charged with federally. And I'm wondering what you think is going on in federal prosecutors in their minds, because we have multiple people who have said they were underage when they were allegedly raped. Why wouldn't these charges be brought in the federal side of things?
So I think that's like a fair question. I think the issue, it's a couple issues. One is, the standard for a civil lawsuit is so much lower than it is to be able to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I don't think that the feds want to dirty up their cases with potentially cases that don't have that corroboration or support. And so I think they're careful with what they're choosing to go forward with. And remember, none of the cases that are in the federal criminal case involve, at least to my knowledge, individuals that are underage. And so, I think when the feds do put together a case, I think they're really cautious about making sure that their case is overwhelming. And the last thing they want to do is even put in, like, I think we've talked about this before, like you start putting in one witness, like just one witness that's not credible, a jury can start to be like start to see kind of the whole thing begin to shatter. And they start to question all of your witnesses. So I think they don't want to muddy that up.
Right. And I could see it being overwhelming too. Like, for instance, if federal prosecutors called every single plaintiff against him, it would be over and over all of these witnesses. And I feel like the jury would be like, okay, like, who am I supposed to believe? There's so many different people that are being called. So I feel like that could be part of it too. It's just interesting to see that he wasn't actually charged. And I know this is kind of away from the specific allegations, but I have to ask about this. So we've been talking about Diddy for like a year now. A year ago is when this federal raid happened. And I talked to you then, talking to you now. We're headed towards trial, which is set to begin in May. What is going on with Diddy's attorneys? Like Mark 𝗟𝗡𝗞𝗦, huge attorney, he's representing him. And one lawsuit after another just keeps on coming. And I know that the federal case probably takes precedent over the civil, but how are they dealing with all of this? Like, it's an overwhelming amount of information or cases against him.
I mean, that's a great question. We know, I think it was Anthony Rico just got off the case. So he had one of his attorneys and it hasn't been, no one knows why. But he recently, and he's a brilliant attorney, he got off the case quite recently. Remember also, not all of those civil cases are being handled by 𝗟𝗡𝗡𝗞𝗦's team.
Good
I think
point.
some of them are being handled by other civil attorneys. And look, I think the issue really becomes about priority, and it must be incredibly overwhelming. By the way, just so we're clear, even if it's like 50 different attorneys, they all have to communicate so that they're potentially, if there's something that comes out in one, that they know it in another. So I would guess that 𝗟𝗡𝗡𝗏's team is obviously prioritizing the criminal case first, because that's the one that landed him in prison, and in jail. And so, but I do not envy their position of having to deal with all these cases.
And let's not forget, as you said, he is in Brooklyn right now at MDC, where he's been for a while. So if he has all of these different attorneys speaking to them and like getting FaceTime with him, I mean, it just seems like an overwhelming amount of effort, work. But there are a lot of allegations. We talked a bit about Cassie and Lil Rod. I wanted to specifically talk about the freak-offs, which is what they both brought up. Cassie introduced us to this. And then, of course, when the federal indictment came down, we saw that the feds collected 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube. And this kind of had to do with those freak-offs. I don't know. This is kind of rough because he allegedly recorded them. So he used this as revenge porn. Hey, guys, don't tell anyone. I'm going to show this. But now it seems like it's being used against him.
Right. And so, correct. And I know that I'm going to say freak-offs in and of themselves are not a crime. I never thought I never thought I'd use that in a sentence, but freak-offs themselves are not a crime. The issue is if, for example, you're filming someone and they don't know you're filming them. Or B, you film them and then use it against them to bribe them, or to get them to do something else, or to prevent them from doing something. And then the question within and again, freak-offs, is whether or not the individuals were consenting to whatever was happening. And so, which becomes kind of that gray area that I think we talked about before, like, you go into this sexual encounter where you are consenting. Let's assume you're consenting to join in this event, let's say, but then you're given drugs either that you don't know you were given, or you're given drugs that you don't realize the impact that they're going to have on you. And suddenly you're not making the decisions for yourself. And so I think, I'm not saying this is what the crime is, but there's going to be so many aspects of this explored as to what consent was and what it wasn't. And if there are, in fact, videos, I think they're going to be telling in terms of what was the condition of the victims during the events. Is that going to support, which I think the federal prosecution's theory that they were not in a state to consent in certain, and that's just some of the allegations that we've been talking about. Just one thing you were talking about Cassie is, like, you were saying, like, that he didn't think she'd, in a sense, pull the trigger with the case. Or his relationship with her was years ago, so, like, you talk about, like, the control he had over her. That was years of control he had over her. And so it wasn't until, like, this last kind of moment that I'm sure the one thing he thinks about when he's in jail is, like, why the F did I not just settle before she went down a whole different road?
It's still mind-boggling that he didn't. But you talking about the allegation, or their relationship rather, that was years and years ago. And then when she came forward, some other people came forward from like the 90s. So this has kind of been a long spread issue, a pattern, let's say. And if these are true, I'm sure he was thinking, okay, that happened 1994. Okay, great. Like 30 years ago, who cares? And now it's kind of coming back to haunt him. And we talked about the video too. When you were talking about consent, I'm wondering if that's the route that his team is going to take the defense, because, like, what else could they say?
I think 100% that's the route they're going to take. I think they've said that these were consenting adults. And I think that they have a decent argument. Again, I don't know what the evidence is that they're going to be able to present on the prosecution side. But I think that there is going to, like, remember these these criminal cases, it is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the prosecution's burden. It's not Mark 𝗟𝗡𝗏's and his team's burden to disprove it. And so I can't imagine that there's going to be any other road other than A, the credibility of those witnesses, and B, the issue of whether or not they were consenting adults.
Talking about witnesses too, something I talked about in like the body of my story prior to your interview is that JLo allegedly carried this illegal firearm that Diddy made her basically to have power over her.
God.
And the same thing with Cassie. And I'm wondering about those two super big names, Cassie, JLo, witnesses. Could they testify in this trial that's 2 months away from now?
So Cassie, yes, JLo, she's not. She's
busy.
not going to be. You're not. She's busy. She's not going to see her. It's funny. Like I remember, back when they were together, because I remember when the incident happened with the shooting. And you have to realize, like, the reason a lot of times the allegations, when they say that they give their woman the gun, is because sometimes the women's bags aren't checked when they go into some of these clubs. So that's sometimes the reason they think like, oh, no one's going to bother her. So it is power, but it's also kind of like, no one's going to believe she has the gun. That was the allegation back then. And it is interesting that Cassie is saying literally the same thing. So,
That's
if there's
crazy.
truth in numbers.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. This can be one of my last questions because I could talk to you about this and many other things all day.
It's almost like she's the super duper star. Everybody know who she is. They know my name. You gonna check me? Excuse me? And the people that works the front door, the security, because I was one of them before at a couple of clubs. And I can almost imagine me, a big celebrity coming. That's just like Obama or Trump. Let's say Trump and his wife come in. And we searching people at the door. You think I'm going to search Trump's wife? Or ask to check her bag? Get out of here, man. I'm just happy that Jennifer Lopez I'm seeing her. If anything, I might ask for a daggone autograph. Y'all know. That's that celebrity status. And guess what? She the one with the daggone cotton-picking gun. Holy Jesus. I should have known. From now on, check everybody. I don't give a daggone who it is.
But the corroboration, that's the part that I'm like, okay, that's pretty bad against Diddy. If we have multiple people, I mean, it was Lil Rod, it was Cassie talking about this weapon, just for instance. But then there are dozens of people who say, I took a drink, it tasted weird, then I passed out, woke up, and Diddy was assaulting me. Like, we have multiple people saying that. So, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. What do you think?
But remember, I think the question, it's limited in terms of okay, so the federal case is limited to the potential complainants that are going to be testifying,
right.
In the case. So I don't think you're going to be hearing from 10 different people that are going to make these claims. They can try to get in some type of evidence to say, even though he's not being charged for this, there's some type of common scheme or plan, but I'm not sure that that's the road they're going to take with that. But you're right. By the way, Sierra, don't forget, like, people are coming into this case. You think no one that's coming in as a juror is going to not know who he is? They're not going to know what the allegations are. Like, everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows, like all the how, like, basically that his world is burned down. And so I think it's going to be hard pressed to find a jury that like is completely objective when it comes to listening to this evidence.
Jury selection is going to be pretty crazy because we just can't escape P. Diddy. Even though he's in jail, he's behind bars, like, it just keeps coming. We're talking about him now. The headlines just keep coming. So that'll be really interesting. And you made a good point too, that the civil cases are separate from criminal. So we don't know how much of an overlap we're going to see when this does go to trial. But obviously we're going to go and we're going to see what happens and report back. Julie Rendelman, thank you so much for coming on and being one of our first guests on Scandal.
Thank you for having me be one of your first guests.
Here's where I'm going to note that P. Diddy has pleaded not guilty to the federal charges against him and denies all of these allegations.
All of them. Come on, dog. Bad boy. You've been a bad boy.
That's all for Scandal today. I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie. And if you liked today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube to get so much more content. And if you're listening, make sure to like and subscribe on...
Dude, real talk, I'm telling y'all, I'm telling y'all, you got police officers, you got prosecutors, you have judges, I think lawyers. You got people in high places that's coming out filing lawsuits saying that Diddy made them take a bribe. Now, come on. So Dilly, you ain't do none of this. Is that what you telling me? Wait a minute. Let's one more time. There's a lawsuit that's been filed saying that Diddy threatened a police officer, female police officer, to be exact. And she's the one that has something to set that guy up. I was telling y'all, keep your eye on him. Keep an eye on him because this man know he ain't do nothing wrong. He know he ain't do nothing wrong. That's why he keeps filing all this paperwork and stuff. Messed up paperwork. He's doing the best he can to get himself out of jail. If you straight up didn't do nothing, keep filing. Keep pushing, baby. Keep on pushing. They said Diddy is doing some wild stuff, man. Hey, I'm gonna get on up out of here. Y'all let me know. God dang, Diddy just screwing everybody. He's screwing people over. He's screwing men and women, little boys and girls. It's time for this to stop, man. I don't care what anybody say, man. You can't have all these people just pointing the finger in line. I don't think it's that many liars. I really don't think so, man. Not on something this serious. Hey, I'm gonna get on up out of here. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Y'all take it light, take it slow. Tell them Uncle Mike told you so. Peace out.